All right, let me start with a quick intro of Topo. Topo is a research and advisory firm. Keep this brief. We focus on high growth B2B companies and how we help them drive repeatable, scalable growth. We focus on the marketing, sales development, sales, and customer functions. And that's the entirety of our focus. How do we help companies in that part of the business drive repeatable and scalable growth? Today, we're talking about account-based as one of the key strategies that companies use to that end. So when we talk about account-based at Topo, what do we mean? Account-based is coordination, carefully delivering a valuable, personalized experience. This is really about how do we be really relevant in what we deliver. We deliver it together across all the different functions of the organization that are customer facing. And we do that in order to drive engagement, conversion, really progression. Moving forward, each one of the accounts that all of these functions together have agreed that we're prioritizing and focusing on as an organization. What we've seen over the course of the last couple of years is that account-based has really emerged as one of the highest performing go-to-market strategies that organizations are adopting. So here you see data from our latest survey. This is a survey that we fielded right at the end of last year into Q1. The results were published earlier this year. And one of the questions we asked was, how does your account-based go-to-market compare to the other elements you have in your go-to-market mix? Who did we ask? We asked predominantly marketers, because many of the questions we asked were about marketing tactics and budget. We only asked companies that had already adopted, were already running an account-based approach. So this is companies that have experience running their account-based efforts already, predominantly companies that have been doing it for quite a while already. And these were predominantly high growth companies. About half of the panel is growing at 50% or more a year. So this is very much a high growth data set that we're focused on here. You can see across the board on every single piece that we asked about, the account-based approach is better than the traditional or alternative go-to-market approaches that these companies have. Let me call out one here in particular. We see a higher lifetime value. Well, we see a higher lifetime value, no doubt. We're picking the accounts that we should be focused on, but we see it across all of the factors that drive lifetime value. We see that we have better initial deal sizes, that we have better retention, and that we have better upsell, cross-sell growth of those customers. Those three pieces together define our lifetime value. And so we see across all of those factors, the ability to pick where we're going to win and win there successfully gives us the ability to drive better outcomes on these top-line business metrics. So how big of a difference does it actually make? Across the board, these are the averages that we see. About a third increase in ACVs. This number varies quite a bit. Are you using it to move up market? Are you using it to focus on better performing segments or move into new market segments? But what's most notable to me in the data when we dig in this number is that we see this benefit very, very quickly. Companies who've only 6 months into their journey are already seeing this kind of increase in average deal size within their target accounts. On the other side, 48% higher win rate. It's an amazing increase in win rates and in the efficiency in the pipeline that comes from focus. That said, this takes more time to achieve. Companies are not seeing a big impact in win rates in their first 6 months. It's a muscle we have to build, programs we have to develop. We have to get better at focusing and having programs across the entirety of the life cycle. And as we do, we see that win rates increase dramatically within our target accounts. Within those higher value accounts that we're more likely to retain, we're more likely to be able to grow, we learn to be able to have much higher win rates within those accounts as well. What that really does is it gives us a very, very efficient funnel for our organization. What I shared on the slide before, a couple slides back, how do we have better ROI, better LTV, all of those metrics? How do we actually get better results there? It's because the funnel that we have in our account-based approach is so efficient compared to other approaches that we have, that we can choose where we're going to win. We can look at relatively small segments that have the best fit for our organization, where we really will have those better metrics. And now we have the funnel, the efficiency that lets us get scale out of those otherwise relatively small segments. If I look at a traditional demand gen driven go-to-market, I always use, to make my math really easy, 1%. 1% of leads will turn into revenue. It's not particularly efficient. There's a lot of people who don't reach that 1% number even. But again, easy math. In contrast, in an account-based approach, what we're seeing is companies are winning more than 1 out of every 10 accounts they target. Again, I go back to my lead gen days. We didn't even get leads from every account we would want them from or take them from. So that 1% wasn't even at the very top of the market. Here in an account-based approach, from the total number of accounts we target, we're winning 11% of them, more than 1 out of every 10. And that efficiency is what lets us narrow our focus, prioritize the accounts that really do deliver those better business metrics. So on the back of that success, on the back of the performance that we've seen, what are companies looking at next? Not surprisingly, the next thing is, give me more of that. This has been a great driver of growth for us as a business. Get me more of that. And what you see here on screen is the answers that we used in our survey. We were actually a little short-sighted here on the first one. Scalable approach across a broad account list. And in the follow-up one-on-one discussions we had with many of the companies that submitted the survey, what we learned was we really should have just said scaling it, because some wanted to scale across a broad account list, others wanted to scale and get more out of the existing list that they had. Across the board, based on the results, based on the success people are seeing, what we heard across the board is that they're looking to increase their investment and do it while maintaining or improving the efficiency that they have within their investments. We see that in the data here. For companies with all but the smallest deal sizes, we're seeing that on average, year-over-year increases in account-based spending are around 40%. Year-over-year growth in marketing spending associated with account-based, they're about 40%. Now that's not a market growth number. Market growth is higher than that, because this is only within companies that have already adopted it, not accounting for growth of a marketplace overall, as we see more new companies come in and adopting an account-based strategy as a key piece of their own go-to-market. So where are organizations investing today? Now look at this from a couple different angles. First angle is, how much do we spend per account? And if we look at how we budget, how we plan, and how we forecast, this is one of the key metrics to look at just from a planning perspective. If we're spending $3,000 per account over the course of 12 months in our outbound efforts in order to target, if we want to double the size of our target account list, that tells us something about what we'd have to spend to continue to keep that same level of impact per account. If we want to keep a narrower focus, what happens and what's the difference we can make as we increase that spend per account? That gives you a planning metric. As you enter new markets, as you expand to additional verticals, as you grow from 50 to 100 accounts, whatever it might be, that gives you a way to look at what you're spending historically and then apply it to what your plans are going forward. Also gives you a sense for just how much focus and resource goes against each account, particularly if we're targeting less than 1,000, down under less than 100 accounts. We're prioritizing these accounts and putting a lot of resource, a lot of focus on each and every account. This allows a lot of one-on-one tailoring and personalization. Oftentimes, particularly as we get below 100 accounts, custom events that may be being put on, roadshows that are built around our target account list, where we're using that list as the way that we vet what we do and where we do it. You see that also reflected in how companies distribute that spend. Yes, digital is a meaningful piece of this, but events and direct mail and custom content are big pieces of this as well. And as we go towards the smaller target account lists, we see that the importance of events, of custom content, just increase. As we see those larger numbers in that investment per account, we see that people are spending more on events for each account, spending more on direct mail and physical goods as a way to get initial attention, spending more on customized content as a way to have an extreme level of relevance in order to show that they're able to deliver value. So we see those investments shift depending on if we're talking about great impact with a small number of accounts or a little bit broader approach. Above 1,000 target accounts, you see that digital becomes a much bigger piece of the investment and of the focus. We start seeing content syndication become a key piece at 1,000 or even 5,000 target accounts, where the mix changes, but you see that overall, that investment per account is staying relatively high with this distribution across tactics. So what are the individual tactics people are using? I've color-coded these here because I want to highlight the difference between what we say is really important. So we ask people for each one of these tactics, how important do you believe it is? And here for how often they're using it. This is only asking, only including people who said they use it at least most of the time. So there's a lot of people, for instance, who may use direct mail occasionally, but they don't use it all of the time. So we've included here, they're using it in at least most of their programs. And you can see there's a few things. Events, it's really important, but maybe a little harder to use. So we say it's more important than we're likely to use it. A couple that really stand out there. There's a big difference here on content development, where 63% say it's really important, but less than half are actively creating custom content, actively creating content just for their account-based programs. It's an area where we need to figure out from a process perspective and from a budget perspective, how we help to close that gap, because this is a gap that we can take advantage of. I also want to give a little bit of a context here for what a program might look like. This is, I'm going to call it a template of a program. What if we were to, as a program experience that we're creating, we're going to look to use a couple of physical touches. One is simply to get attention. We want to capture attention initially, so a better opportunity to get a response. Then we want to have a second physical piece that does more to set the expectation of our ability to deliver value and address the challenge we sometimes have, that it feels as if our outreach and our programs are mass. We want to change that and make it feel as if this is much more personalized. So in this cadence, there's an initial gift. Maybe it's a gift that goes to the department and something that can be shared within the team. And there's SDRs to follow up after that, following up within a day or two of that being received. So they're going to have the best opportunity to be remembered and to get a response to their initial outreach. Next, they've already reached out to this company. So they take something, it's already planned out ahead of time, but they take a piece of content that's relevant to that company, that's relevant to the discussion that they want to have, that they believe will be valuable to that company, and they drop that in the mail with a note. Hey, thought of you. Remember, they just reached out to them, pointing them to something or telling them something why that content they believe resonates specifically with that company and why it's relevant. And so you're creating the perception as you do this, that you have something specific to this company and that they're top of mind for you. I'm thinking of you. You're not part of my 5,000 company, 5,000 name direct mail bomb. No, this is small, and we're thinking of each one of you individually. And so then the SDR is following up based on that now. Now we have a clear call to action. We sent you this. We'd love to share more. We'd love to get that meeting, and here's why we believe we can deliver value to you based on our expertise in that meeting. All the while this is happening, we continue to have a high-level digital outreach, high-level air cover, things that give us a presence more broadly within that organization. And that's likely continuing over an extended period of time. But here we have this short, high-effort, high-intensity pursuit where we're doing everything we can to get a response for our SDRs or sales or customer success or whoever is the lead on that one-to-one outreach piece of what we're doing. So far, the data that I shared has been all about what we saw across our survey, the averages, the benchmarks. Now, we do bias our survey to high growth companies that are performing better. So that average is probably skewed a little higher than the market overall. But what I want to share next is I want to share 3 things that when we go back and look at our survey and drill into the best performing companies only, that we see them doing these 3 things differently from other folks that have adopted an account-based approach. The first thing is the best performing companies are investing in their ideal customer profile. We asked, how confident are you that the ICP accurately represents the best fit and higher value accounts? This is a stark difference. This is the biggest difference I can find in the entire data set between the best performing organizations and the other organizations in the survey. 81% say, yeah, I'm confident in that. Only 42% of the rest of the sample, almost double the likelihood that they've invested in the development, in the process, in the alignment to develop that confidence that they have their ICP, and therefore downstream, they have the target accounts right for their organization. It makes a huge, huge difference. Next, what we see is the best performing organizations are not just focused on acquisition. They're focused across the entire life cycle. In particular, almost 2/3 of them have developed specific plays for velocity, for pipeline progression. And when I shared earlier that we see a 48% improvement in win rates within our target accounts, but it takes time to get there. This is one of the reasons why. The best performing organizations have, all else equal, been doing it a little bit longer. And they've had more time to develop the programs that stretch across the entirety of the customer lifecycle. We see that impact in that higher win rate in the programs that they've built. They're focused across that entire lifecycle, not just on those first early acquisition to first meeting stages. The last thing I want to highlight here, winners go harder. They're going after more contacts at each account. Another side of that winners go harder, where I shared all of the different tactics that companies are using. Winners use, those best performing companies use more tactics on average on a consistent basis. They use 8 of those 12 items on average. They go after, for $250,000 and above deal sizes, they go after nearly 9 contacts on average per account in each program versus only 6 for others. It's nearly a 50% increase. They're focusing their resources, prioritizing these accounts, and going after more people, using more tactics, putting more effort into their pursuit of those high value accounts. Something that they can probably only do on an ongoing and sustained basis because of what I shared first. They're confident that they have the right accounts that allows them to continue to invest like that and allows them to see the improved results that they're getting out of their account-based efforts. All right, so with that, a couple takeaways I want to share, and then we can open up here for questions. First, we shared that today, the account-based go-to-market strategy is becoming one of the best performing pieces of the overall go-to-market mix. We're seeing increases in adoption and investment. Investments are increasing significantly as we see maturity and as we see those results established that people understand and can look to set their expectations and make the case for those increased investments. All of those tactics I shared are all tactics that we all already use. We understand how to use and work with SDRs. We understand how to use advertising and direct mail and events. These are all tactics that we use. The difference when we put together these account-based programs is how we coordinate across tactics that cross multiple functional areas in order to create that high-value experience that gives us a better response rate and a better opportunity to progress the relationship and the deals with each one of those accounts. And finally, to recap on what those best performing companies do differently. They create ICP, they start from the right accounts that everyone is aligned to, and they focus on those accounts across the life cycle, going after more contacts, using more tactics, investing more of their time, of their resource and their effort against that set of accounts that they've been able to align to. All right, with that, I'll turn it back over for questions.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Eric. That was great. To everyone on the line, I'd encourage you to enter your questions in the Q&A box now. We've already had quite a few come through, so I'll start off with those. The first one is, how do I know account-based makes sense for my business?
Well, there's a couple of things that we can go into a lot more detail, but there's a few things that I use. If I say, we have a spectrum of the go-to-market that on one side, I'm going to take channel off the list for the moment, but on one side, I have traditional volume demand gen. On the other side, I have, very high tailored individual one-to-one type of account-based efforts. The larger my deal size, the more I'm going to skew towards account-based and highly tailored account-based. The higher, the more complex my sales process is, all else equal. Again, I'm going to skew towards an account-based approach. The more discrete my market is, let's say that I serve truly only one industry, or I work with a ecosystem part of one of the platforms out there, and I can only work with their clients, people who are using their platform. So the more discrete that market is, the more value I get out of an account-based approach, because it limits the waste. It limits the bleed out beyond that market I can directly serve. And then the last piece that I'll flag is if I'm focused on customers and I have more information about customers and I'm expected to be more relevant, to use that knowledge I have of them in the way that I look to engage with them, the more likely it is that I'm going to be taking an account-based approach. There's no hard and fast rule of if your ACV is above X, anything like that that I can point to. Those are all else equal. The more you have larger deal sizes, complex process, discretely defined market, or focused on customers, the more likely it is that an account-based approach is going to be your solution. Now, when you look at the scale and how much people are increasing their investment, I pointed to the 25K and above. What we are seeing is that a lot of companies with investment, with average deal sizes, below $25,000 on an annual basis are either reducing or not increasing as quickly their investment in account-based. For most of those companies, unless they hit that marker of they have a very discrete market they serve, and so they get the benefit of that discrete market below 25,000, we see that a lot of companies slow their investment back away from it unless they have that real discrete market focus. Above 25,000, we're much more likely to see that companies are increasing their investment. Above about $100,000 to $200,000 in ACV, it becomes a pretty difficult case typically for why it wouldn't be one part of your go-to-market.
Awesome. So the next question I'm seeing is, what is the difference between an engagement play and a velocity play? Can you elaborate?
Yeah, so the way that we asked that question, we asked very specifically about how do I get an account that is basically not engaged with me at all to an account that is engaged with people or digitally, whatever the case may be. So how do I go from no engagement to whatever sort of engagement I'm looking for, but not beyond that first meeting? That's kind of the first meeting is the end point as to where we would say this is a initial engagement play that we've built. Yes, pipeline, we're driving engagement, but our purpose is a very specific form of engagement that moves us forward as opposed to getting that first engagement from the company.
Awesome. Here's a good one. As companies are shifting over to account-based, what are they doing with their demand gen budgets? So traditional MQL-based funnel, are they reducing spend?
Depends on how fast they're growing. If you're a fast-growing company, your marketing budgets are growing almost as quickly as revenue in many cases, then what we're seeing is demand gen budget just grows a little slower in order to fund initial account-based pilots. On the other end, we see companies that are a little bit more static from a revenue perspective, and they need to make some changes in that revenue portfolio. Their demand gen approach is not cutting it. And in that case, we will see an initial decrease in demand gen, typically not large. This is an incremental, particularly in early days approach. We're not blowing up the things that have worked to get us to where we are today. We're adding on to give ourselves an element within our market that we can have an increased level of focus on. And so from that perspective, unless you're a very small company looking to make those initial investments and you don't have a big base, I would say that about a 20% initial investment is about the max that we would see for that initial, how am I starting to adopt this approach? It goes higher with really high growth companies where they've got a lot of budget available, freeing up for incremental activity over and above what they did, say, in whatever their prior period is. And sometimes we'll see there that a bigger initial chunk of budget will go towards an account-based approach. But it's not starting at 50 or 75 or 100% of your budget. You continue with the things that got you there, maybe simply tempering them a little bit, as opposed to dramatically shifting the mix of your go-to-market investment in year one.
Got it. Couple questions around the tech stack. Interested in the account-based tech stack needed, if there is a specific tech stack needed. Wondering if HubSpot is up for account-based, if this alone could work, measure and manage an account-based strategy.
A few different things packed in there. So first, technology should come later in your process from both a planning perspective and typically from a spending perspective. We don't start with the technology. We start with what is it that we want to create as the experience for these accounts? And can I do it in a pilot mode at least to prove that out? Can I test it with a technology that I already have? For a lot of tactics and a lot of pieces of the execution, the answer to that is yes. There will be some pieces where you may need to add some incremental bits of technology in the early days. But for the most part, you can start with existing technology that you likely already have and shape the experience you're going to create and find the path to delivering it off of that existing technology. Not knowing exactly what that experience then looks like for you, HubSpot might or might not be a very reasonable solution for you along those lines. We see a lot of companies that are using HubSpot still as their marketing automation type of solution, adopting an account-based approach. we don't see very many companies that are continuing with HubSpot as the core CRM. Most of those companies have moved up to Salesforce or something similar on the CRM side of their stack when they're getting ready to adopt an account-based approach. Not to say it can't happen, not to say it can't work. Again, back to the experience. What is it you need to create? What's the data you'll need to be able to get out of it for that? But that's what we're seeing in terms of a typical set of tech stack decisions or kind of place that companies are already in when they're making the decision to run their first pilots.
Awesome.
Did I get all the pieces of that question, or did I miss one?
I think you covered all of the pieces.
Cool.
Again, I think the point here is that you want to be sure that you're investing in a pilot up front before investing in any account-based specific technology. How do you motivate marketing and sales working together? Could you elaborate a bit more on each of their roles in the account-based approach?
Yeah, so we got to start, and this is a gap that unfortunately we see too often. We've adopted this account-based thing because it's shiny and people like me and other people at conferences and whatnot said it's really great, but we're not really clear on why we're adopting it for ourselves. We see this happen too often. We see it happen where we are, because we're not clear on the purpose of what we're trying to get to and what we're trying to accomplish, and we haven't all agreed that that's the purpose we really need, that this is the thing that makes a difference, responds to the pain or challenge that we have in the go-to-market mix we'd have in place otherwise, it's really hard to get everybody aligned. We got to start with that clarity of purpose. What's our why for why we're doing this? And that usually will go a long ways to, if we have an alignment problem, to helping us understand why. So we can start to work against the root of that problem, which is, for instance, I'm in marketing. I'm trying to do this in order to improve the quality of the pipeline that I create. But when I go over to the sales side, they're saying, no, those aren't the right accounts, or you're now asking me to get engaged with all of those accounts a lot earlier because you're taking and saying, lead qualification for it to go over to sales is now just, I found a person at this account with the right authority level who's willing to take a meeting. We'd see that as a reduction in the lead qualification criteria. And for sales, they may very well say, you know what, I don't actually want ones that are that early because the quality isn't there. The quality is not high enough to reduce it by that much. We've kind of slipped out of alignment there. We've got to go back and revisit, okay, we're going to go to that level on our lead qualification, and that's a problem. Well, typically that's a sign that actually our account list is a little bit too broad, and we haven't actually hit, to begin with, the set of accounts that sales is actually passionate about and willing to invest more in. If I go back to what I showed earlier, this is an approach that has us investing more in a specific set of accounts. And if we haven't agreed that we're going to invest more in this set of accounts across all of the functions, including both marketing and sales, then we're going to find that we're not really ready to execute together. So how do we get to that point? Well, we have all of the typical things that follow to get to the point where we can actually work together on it and get to that alignment in execution, not just alignment in principle, which is there's probably going to be new roles and responsibilities, new lines drawn. There's going to be some new processes that we put in place, particularly as we look to scale our approaches. We're going to go through many of the same steps that we went through when establishing our demand gen and handoffs. What is the qualification criteria we have? What are the SLAs? What are the roles and responsibilities? And we're going to look at that when we say these 100 accounts that we've all prioritized, how is it different there? What do those roles and responsibilities, what do those SLAs look like within this set of accounts? And it'll become distinct from the overall, because we all are expecting to behave differently against these accounts. We need to update that shared understanding, which is usually in documentation and process of how we behave with these accounts as well.
Great. Let's see. Um, any tactical pointers for moving your organization? We've kind of already answered bits and pieces of this, but tactics around moving your organization away, and I would caution away from, but away from the lead MQL focused model and more focused on account-based engagement metrics. Anything there, Eric?
Well, one of the things that is really important on that front is just to get the measurement in place, and don't stop at account level engagement. Let's put a measurement framework in place that focuses only on the accounts that we said we were going to prioritize and make a bigger difference in. And then let's make certain that we're focused on the outcomes of that, not just in initial engagement, but across the entirety of the acquisition process, as well as the customer life cycle, post win. What does that look like across that set of accounts? So if we go in and say, we're focused on these 447 accounts, January 1, these are the ones we're prioritizing this year. On December 31, and then incremental basis so you can manage it between those points, can you report back on those 447 and how you're doing at moving each one of those accounts forward? How many of them did you create new opportunities with? How many of them did you close and win new deals with? And when it comes to the tactics don't change as much. But that focus we get from saying, I'm no longer focused on just, I ran a program, 7% of the people I targeted responded and ended up taking a meeting, pat on the back, good conversion rate. No, we're saying, hey, that's 93% that didn't get there. I'm continuing to focus on all of those accounts. And so that will have a bigger impact, that new lens on how you apply the tactics, how you continue to run programs to find the best way to move each one of those accounts to the next point. Not the tactics that change so much as the focus that you bring to them.
Great. Any guidelines for how many accounts to target? Is it better to spend or do more with, say, 250 accounts versus spending the same money and time on, say, 1,000 accounts? Again, it probably depends on your selling motion and your average deal size, but any kind of general best practice tips there, Eric?
Yeah, you kind of queued me up with the it depends answer, Meg. Let's go back to the purpose. And 250 versus 1,000 may not be the difference there, but should I really start with top 25? Because my goal is really, to create $1 million deals where I've got an average deal size of 200,000, and that's going to be a rarefied group for me. That would give you the hint, the purpose for why we're doing this in the first place would give you some hints for the scale side. The next piece is on the investment. Showed averaging about $3,000 per account for the 100 to 1,000 accounts targeted tier. Those are significant investments, and take a look at the budget. It doesn't mean you have to spend that much, but put yourself in the shoes of the account that you're pursuing, the individuals that you're going after within each one of those accounts. Do they feel the difference? Are you creating a meaningfully different experience? Or when you said, I'm going to start with 1,000 accounts, you actually spread yourself so thin that the experience for each of those 1,000 accounts didn't change that much. And if it didn't really change much, then those metrics I shared towards the beginning of companies are creating a new opportunity with 21% of the accounts they pursue, winning a new piece of business with 11% of the accounts that they pursue. Getting to that mark requires a meaningfully different experience that we create versus traditional demand gen. So if you have the budget to continue to create that experience, or do you not? And that's going to draw you back down to that initial lower, smaller target account list. So that would be one primary key consideration there. The other thing I'd look at is, what does it mean for you to scale beyond? And this tends to be, 250 to 1,000 is not actually where this kicks in as much. But we'll oftentimes see companies start with, I'm going to prove this works with 10 accounts. And once I prove it works, I'm going to scale that up to 200 accounts. What you can do for 10 and what you can do for 200 from a human resource perspective is vastly different. And that's not actually a pilot that you can roll out. You can prove the benefit of focus, but not in a way that you can scale out to 200 accounts. So if I'm doing this to get started, what does my long-term plan look like? And how do I ensure that this is setting myself up to be able to treat it as a pilot that I can actually roll out and create a similar experience for at the next stage of scale that I'm looking to get to?
Awesome. How do you apply account-based to expanding existing customers? It's a great question. And account-based is actually very well aligned to expansion. Any particular guidance here, Eric? And I know we're running very close on time, so I believe this will be our last question.
Okay. Within customers, let's first separate here, what's it mean to expand within this customer? We oftentimes have, particularly going after really large accounts, we have two different motions for customer growth. We have one that approaches the account kind of like a brand new account for us. It's a completely different business. We can maybe bring some of our learning from internal working within the account, but it's not going to be kind of a point of continuity for the relationship. The other, and the place that we probably want to focus here for the question, because it's a bigger change, is how do I take my account-based approach to grow customers, focusing on the relationship I already have as the starting point. You're going to need to take a one-to-one, one-to-few type of approach here. That doesn't mean, crazy customized content, assessments, experiences, things along those lines. You already have the relationship as the starting point. And so what can we do to pick a very small number of those accounts when we first get started and enable our team to build on the relationships that they already have? You'll be much more focused here on enablement, content, and insights. You'll be much more focused here on how do you take advantage of the points of engagement you already have in place. One of the things that we see become the most important piece here is the QBR, quarterly business review. How do we turn that into a strategic look forward potential for our customer meeting as an opportunity to spark that next set of conversations, oftentimes with the same or an adjacent group within the organization. Now that's not going to get you expansion within, the likes of IBM across the entirety of the organization. It will within kind of adjacent areas. So the other side of that is, how do I simply continue to work against those accounts, treating them a little closer to net new? But it's on that customer side where we can use the engagement points we already have and really put our focus on how do we enable those to become the kinds of conversations that spark new opportunities and introductions. And if you don't have, in a SaaS environment, if you don't have a QBR process in place already, that would be the first change that I would make there.
Got it. I am being told we have time for one more question. So if okay with you, Eric, I'll
go.
Pick the next one. Okay, cool. With the average number of contacts being around 9 for larger ASP deals, so about a 9-person buying committee, could you speak to how persona-based messaging comes into play from a marketing/SDR activity standpoint?
I'm hesitating here because I'm not sure why it would change. persona-based messaging is part of how we're relevant to all the people that we're reaching out to. It is part of what, particularly with our SDRs, they're going to continue to use. What I do to, let's say I'm selling something, it's a technology solution for a group within HR. When I reach out to HR versus when I reach out to who I believe are aligned IT contacts with that initiative, of course, I'm going to use what I know about those personas in order to tailor my messaging. Now, when it comes to the marketing side and the templates, the direct mail, the advertising, things along those lines, that's where we may end up sometimes because of limitations of our ability to target, like potentially on the advertising side, or limitations on the production and design side. We may end up separating what is 6 different personas that our SDRs may be using and really focusing kind of the produced material on only 2, because we have the additional layer that helps to make us relevant to people as well, that is tailored to the account and specific information about the account. And so we have an intersection where we have information about the account and information about the individual roles or personas. From an SDR perspective, we're going to continue to use those personas. There's been some folks out in the market who talk about it almost like, hey, now that we know who the accounts are, it doesn't matter who the people are. No, everything that we've had on how do we be relevant to people in order to engage them effectively within these accounts still applies. We're just taking an approach that layers also account on top, which is where we get a lot more context for a lot of the business drivers that they may be dealing with. We're still going to use both. The only place that I give my note of hesitation there is if you used to do programs that went to 6 different roles, you'd rotate through, you'd do something for mid-level IT, you'd do something for senior IT, you'd do something for strategy, you'd do something for HR, you'd do something for operations, and you did those all individually around roles. When you roll that up to account, you might have a couple fewer variations on the outbound marketing side because you're narrowing in on accounts that are similar first, and that's giving you actually more relevance to those roles. But I'm still going to use the personas that I've developed and used historically and proven out historically when it comes to the additional level of personalization that SDRs use.
Awesome. All right, we are out of time. Thank you so much, Eric. Thank you to everyone who has joined. If you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to the Marketing Center of Excellence or the Sales Center of Excellence, and we will be sure to do another of these because it sounds like there's lots of interest in all things account-based, not surprisingly. So thanks again, Eric, and we'll talk to you all soon.